They say rock bottom is a solid foundation on which you rebuild your life. But when Elena Marshall walked out of the Sullivan and Pierce conference room that Tuesday morning in early November, she didn't feel a foundation. She felt the earth opening up to swallow her whole. The mahogany table stretched between them like a chasm. Derek Vaughan sat across from her, checking his Patek Philippe, the watch she'd saved 2 years to buy him for his 30th birthday, working double shifts at a diner while he pitched investors over cocktails. He didn't look at her. He looked at the time. "Are we done here?" His voice carried the same flat tone he used with vendors who missed delivery windows. James Sullivan, senior partner at the firm, snapped the thick file shut with practiced finality. "We're done, Mr. Vaughan. The prenuptial agreement you both signed 10 years ago, combined with the recent restructuring of your assets into Delaware and Nevada trust accounts, leaves Mrs. Marshall with, well, as discussed, the settlement is final." Elena stared at her hands. They were rougher than they used to be. 10 years ago, she'd been a promising logistics analyst at a consulting firm, building models that Fortune 500 companies paid 6 figures to license. Then Derek had an idea for a tech startup. Horizon Freight Solutions, he'd called it. Revolutionary last-mile delivery optimization. It needed capital. It needed time. It needed a wife who would scrub floors and wait tables at Goss Diner on 4th Avenue just to pay the server bills while he networked at country clubs. She had done it all. She had believed in the we. "Derek," her voice came out smaller than she wanted, "I don't care about the shares, but the house, my mother's piano is in there. You know that's the only thing I have left of her." Derek finally looked at her. His eyes, once a comforting blue that reminded her of summer skies over Cape Cod, were now cold steel. He stood, buttoning his $5,000 suit with the kind of practiced motion that comes from standing up and walking away from disappointing meetings all day long. "The house is being liquidated to cover the initial IPO costs for the merger with Apex Corporation. And Sienna wants to redecorate the penthouse anyway." He checked his phone, scrolling with his thumb. "The piano was donated to Goodwill yesterday. It was clutter." The name hit her like a physical blow. Sienna Blake. 24 years old, Derek's chief of staff. The woman Elena had welcomed into their home for Christmas dinner last year because she'd seemed lonely, an orphan working late on the holidays. Elena had made her grandmother's stuffing recipe, the one with chestnuts and sage. "You donated it." The words barely made it past the tightness in her throat. "Derek, you knew. You knew that piano was—" "It's done, Elena," he interrupted, typing something into his phone. "Look, I'm not a monster. I put $8,000 in your personal account. That's enough for a deposit on an apartment in Queens and a few months to find a job. You're resourceful. You survived before me. You'll survive after me." He turned to Sullivan. "James, send the finalized papers to the board. I have a celebration dinner at Le Bernardin at 7. Derek walked out. He didn't look back. He walked out of their marriage the same way he walked out of a boring meeting, efficiently, ruthlessly, and without a second thought for the people he was leaving behind. Elena stood there, the silence of the conference room deafening except for the faint hum of the HVAC system pushing recycled air through invisible vents. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan sprawled beneath her, indifferent to the small tragedies playing out in its towers. Sullivan cleared his throat. "Mrs. Sterling, or Miss Vance, I suppose, I suggest you cash this quickly." He slid a check across the table. "It's a courtesy. Legally, he owed you nothing." "Why?" The question came out raw. "I built that company with him. I wrote the original business plan on napkins at the diner during my breaks." Sullivan's smile carried the weight of 1,000 such conversations. "On napkins? Not on contracts. In the world of business, Miss Vance, if it isn't signed, it didn't happen. You were a placeholder, a startup cost. And now the company has gone public. He's moved on to the next phase." Elena grabbed her purse, a worn leather satchel she'd had since college. back when she still believed hard work and intelligence were enough. She left the check on the table, $8,000, the price Derek Vaughn had assigned to 10 years of her life. She walked out of the skyscraper and onto Fifth Avenue. It had started to rain, a cold, biting November rain that soaked through her silk blouse, her court date blouse, the nicest thing she owned that wasn't a gift from Derek. Her phone buzzed, a text from him. Security codes to the house have been changed. Your suitcases are with the doormen. Please collect them by 5 p.m. or they go to the curb. Elena looked up at the sky, letting the rain mix with her tears. She felt small, invisible. She was 32 years old with a gap in her resume the size of a marriage and a heart shattered into pieces so small she didn't know where to begin gathering them up. She hailed a cab, her hand shaking. "Where to, lady?" She didn't know. She just gave him the address of the only other person in the city who might care. Harper Sinclair, her old college roommate who lived in a cramped walk-up in Brooklyn. 1847 Willoughby Street. But as the cab merged into traffic, Elena didn't see the black SUV trailing 3 cars behind. And she certainly didn't know that Derek's cruelty had just set off a chain reaction that would wake a sleeping giant. The rain had turned into a torrential downpour by the time the cab dropped her off. Elena wrestled her 2 suitcases out of the trunk, the driver speeding away before she could even check her bearings, his taillights disappearing into the gray curtain of water. She wiped the rain from her eyes and looked at the building. This didn't look like Harper's place. Harper lived in a loud, vibrant neighborhood in Brooklyn where bodega owners knew everyone's name and fire escapes doubled as summer living rooms. This was the Upper East Side, a street lined with townhouses that whispered old money through their very silence. Heavy wrought iron gates, limestone facades, ivy crawling up walls like ancient veins. Elena checked her phone. Dead battery. She must have mumbled the address wrong in her daze, or the driver misheard. Willoughby Street to Willoughby Lane. Easy mistake, fatal mistake. She shivered. She was soaked to the bone. Her silk blouse clung to her skin like a second layer of cold. She looked at the house number in front of her. 1847. It was a massive structure, dark and imposing, with ivy that looked almost deliberate in its architectural menace. There were no lights on. It looked abandoned, or perhaps just asleep, waiting for something. "Okay, Elena," she muttered to herself, her teeth chattering. "Just ask to use a phone. Just get a charger. You can't stand on the street with 2 suitcases in a storm." She dragged the luggage up the stone steps. They felt like they weighed a ton, filled with the debris of her life. Clothes she'd worn to Derek's corporate events, a few books she'd managed to grab, the framed photo of her and Derek from their honeymoon in Nantucket that she hadn't had the heart to throw away yet. She reached for the heavy brass knocker, shaped like a lion's head with a ring in its mouth. She let it fall 3 times. Thud, thud, thud. Silence pressed against her eardrums. She waited, counting her heartbeats, watching the rain create rivers down the limestone steps. "Please," she whispered to no one, "just someone be home." She knocked again, harder this time, desperation leaking into the force of it. If no one answered, she'd have to drag her bags to a subway station, and the nearest one was 6 avenues away. Suddenly, the heavy oak door groaned. It didn't open fully. It just cracked a few inches. A chain was still engaged. A pair of eyes peered out from the darkness, intense, dark, and set in a face that was shadowed, but somehow familiar in the way that dreams are familiar. "We don't buy Girl Scout cookies." The voice was deep, slightly gravelly, but not unkind. "And we don't want any solar panels." "Please." Elena's voice cracked like ice breaking. "I don't want to sell anything. I'm lost. My phone died. I just need to call a cab. Please, I'm soaked." The eyes narrowed, scanning her with an intensity that felt clinical. They took in the expensive but drenched blouse, the designer suitcases that cost more than most people's monthly rent, the utter devastation in her posture. shoulders curved inward like she was trying to fold herself into something small enough to disappear. This wasn't a beggar. This was a woman falling apart in real time. The door closed for a second. Elena's heart sank into her stomach. He was locking her out. She'd be on the street in the rain, with nowhere to go and a dead phone in. Then the sound of the chain sliding back echoed through the wood. The door swung open wide. Standing there was a man who looked like he hadn't seen the sun in months. He was tall, maybe 6'2", wearing a black turtleneck and gray sweatpants, the kind of casual that only people who don't care about opinions can pull off. He had a beard that was neatly trimmed but thick, and his hair was dark, swept back carelessly, but it was his face that struck her. Handsome, undeniably, but it carried a weight, a sadness that mirrored her own. And then something strange happened. He looked at her, really looked at her, the way people used to look before Derek taught her that looking meant evaluating, appraising, judging worth. And his lips curled upward. It wasn't a leer. It wasn't a polite grimace. It was a genuine, warm smile, the kind of smile you give someone you've been waiting for. "Well," he said, stepping aside and gesturing into the warm, golden light of the hallway, "you better come in before you catch pneumonia. I'm Nathaniel." Elena hesitated. Her mother had taught her never to enter a stranger's house. But Derek had taught her that the people you trust are the ones who hurt you the most. Maybe a stranger was safer. Maybe a stranger was the only safe thing left in the world. She stepped across the threshold, dragging her wet suitcase behind her. The moment her heel hit the marble floor of the foyer, warmth enveloped her like a blanket pulled from a dryer. "I'm Elena," she said, dripping water onto an intricate Persian rug that probably cost more than Derek's car. "I'm so sorry about your floor." Nathaniel closed the massive door and locked out the storm. "Floor's dry. Spirits are harder to fix." He walked past her toward a grand staircase that curved upward into shadow. "I was just making tea. Earl Grey. I assume you take it with lemon?" Elena blinked, stunned. "How did you? You look like a lemon person." He paused on the first step and turned back. The light from the chandelier hit his face at an angle. "Sugar is for people who haven't had a hard enough day yet." Elena opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. She just nodded. "Yes, lemon, no sugar." Nathaniel continued up the stairs. "Follow me, leave the suitcases. They're not going anywhere." Elena left her luggage by the door and followed him up into the house, her wet shoes squeaking against the marble. At the top of the stairs, he led her through a hallway lined with closed doors. Guest rooms, maybe, or libraries, or rooms that held the accumulated weight of a life she couldn't yet imagine. And finally into a library that was larger than the entire apartment she had shared with Derek. Books stretched from floor to ceiling on 3 walls. A fire crackled in a massive limestone hearth. 2 leather wingback chairs faced each other across a low table where a silver tea service waited, steam rising from the pot like a question mark. "Sit," Nathaniel said, not as a command, but as an invitation. Elena sat. She held the porcelain teacup with both hands to stop them from shaking. The warmth seeped into her fingers, chasing away the numbness. Nathaniel sat opposite her. He had changed into a crisp white button-down shirt, though he remained barefoot. It made him look dangerous, relaxed but ready to spring. "Earl Grey," he said, pouring her cup with steady hands, "with lemon." He was right. It was exactly what she needed. The citrus cut through the shock, sharp and clean. They sat in silence for a moment. The fire popped. Rain hammered against windows she couldn't see. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked. "You look like someone who just signed something they'll regret," Nathaniel said finally, breaking the silence like a stone through glass. Elena's hand froze halfway to her mouth. "How would you know?" Pattern recognition. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with those dark eyes. "It's what I do." She set the cup down carefully, afraid if she held it any longer, she'd throw it at something. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're wearing a $2,000 blouse that's soaked through because you were too proud to wait for the rain to stop. I know those suitcases in my foyer are Toomey, expensive, but not new. Gifts, probably. I know you left something behind today, something more valuable than money, or you wouldn't be standing in a stranger's house, looking like the world just ended. He paused, taking a sip of his own tea. And I know that whoever made you feel that way is going to regret it. Elena felt something crack inside her chest. You can't possibly know that. Nathaniel smiled, that same genuine smile from the door, but sharper now, with an edge of something she couldn't quite name. I'm Nathaniel Cross, and you, Elena Marshall, are currently shivering on my rug because you just signed away 10 years of your life to a man who never deserved them. Elena's blood turned to ice. How do you know my last name? I only said Elena. Nathaniel set down his cup with deliberate care. He walked over to a chaotic desk covered in blueprints and monitors, tapped a keyboard, and a screen lit up. I remember everything, Elena. There was an article in Small Business Journal 7 years ago. The couple behind Horizon Freight Solutions. You were in the background of the photo, holding the schematics. Derek Vaughn was in the front, holding the champagne. He turned back to face her. I always wondered when the guy holding the champagne would realize the schematics were worth more. Elena stood up so fast the tea sloshed over the rim of the cup. Who are you? I told you, Nathaniel Cross. He walked back to his chair and sat down, completely at ease. I've been waiting for a new chess partner. Derek Vaughn just made the biggest mistake of his life, and tonight, I think I'm going to help you make him pay for it. Elena's mind raced. Nathaniel Cross. The name echoed in her memory like a bell in fog. She'd read about him in business school, case studies on disruptive innovation, cautionary tales about rapid ascension. The boy king of Wall Street made his first billion at 22, revolutionizing biotech supply chains. Then 18 months ago, he'd vanished. Rumors said he'd gone mad. Others said he was heartbroken. Most just said he was a myth. And here he was in sweatpants, offering her tea. You disappeared, she said slowly. I retreated. Nathaniel's expression darkened. There's a difference. Apex Corporation stole my proprietary algorithm for autonomous shipping 3 years ago. They rebranded it, sued me for copyright infringement using my own work against me. I had the money to fight. I didn't have the will. My wife, Sarah, she died in a car accident during the trial. I folded. I hid. He stood and walked to the fire, staring into the flames. I've spent the last 18 months in this house, trying to rebuild what they took from me, trying to remember why it mattered. Elena felt her anger cooling, replaced by something else. Recognition. I'm sorry about your wife. Don't be. Nathaniel turned back to her. She wouldn't want sympathy. She'd want action, and so should you. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and knelt in front of her chair, bringing his face level with hers. Up close, she could see the exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair. Derek's merger with Apex Corporation isn't a merger, Elena. It's a trap. Victor Aldrich, Apex's CEO, is setting up a hostile takeover. He needs Horizon's last-mile distribution network, the one you designed, to complete his monopoly. 2 weeks from now at the Global Tech Summit, Derek is going to announce a partnership. 6 months later, Aldrich will push him out and own everything. Elena's breath caught. How do you know this? Because Aldrich did it to me. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He partners, he learns, he destroys. It's his pattern, and Derek Vaughn is walking straight into it. Why do you care what happens to Derek? Nathaniel stood, offering her his hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet. I don't, but I care about destroying Apex, and you, Elena Marshall, are the key. He walked to his desk and pulled out a thick, black folder. He opened it on the table between them. Inside were financial documents, legal filings, photographs of Derek at business dinners with Victor Aldrich, spreadsheets that made her head spin. I'm offering you a partnership, Nathaniel said. I provide the capital, $50 million to start. You provide the inside knowledge and the public face. We build a competing logistics network. We expose Derek's fraud. We tank Horizon's value before the merger can go through. We destroy Aldrich's monopoly before it starts. He flipped to a page near the back. This contract gives you 55% equity in Meridian Ventures. I keep 45. If we succeed, you won't just be rich. You'll own the infrastructure that moves 40% of American e-commerce. You'll be untouchable. Elena stared at the contract. The words blurred together. $50 million. 55%. Meridian Ventures. Derek's name crossed out and replaced with hers in every scenario that mattered. We have 15 weeks until the tech summit in early February, Nathaniel continued. 15 weeks to build what Derek thinks he already owns. Elena picked up the pen from the table. Her hand hovered over the signature line. This was insane. She just walked out of one legal agreement that destroyed her. Why would she walk into another? Because Derek had taken everything. Her work, her piano, her dignity. He'd reduced her to a startup cost. A line item to be written off. She signed. Then she added a handwritten clause at the bottom. Decision-making power, 50-50. I'm not a figurehead. Nathaniel read it and smiled. The first real smile she'd seen that reached his eyes. I wouldn't want a figurehead. He extended his hand. She shook it. His grip was firm, warm, and for the first time in 10 years, Elena felt like someone was shaking hands with her. Not with Derek's wife, not with the woman behind the man, but with her. Get some rest, Nathaniel said. Tomorrow we start building your empire. Elena fell asleep on the library couch, exhaustion finally winning the war against adrenaline. The last thing she remembered was Nathaniel draping a cashmere throw over her shoulders and whispering, "Tomorrow we'll figure out if you're ready to fight back." When she woke, morning light streamed through tall windows she hadn't noticed in the dark. The library looked different in daylight, less like a cave and more like a command center. The books weren't decoration. They were worn, read, referenced. Sticky notes protruded from legal texts and business theory volumes. Nathaniel was already awake, sitting at his desk with a laptop and 3 monitors arranged in a semicircle. He'd prepared breakfast, French press coffee, fresh croissants, fruit arranged on a silver tray. I didn't know if you'd still be here, he said without looking up. Where else would I go? Elena sat up, pulling the throw around her shoulders. Harper doesn't even know I'm... She stopped. Harper, I need to call her. Nathaniel slid a phone across the desk. Charged. Use it, Elena called. Harper answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep. Hello? Harper, it's Elena. I'm so sorry I didn't make it to your place last night. Elena? What? I didn't know you were coming over. Are you okay? I'm fine. I'm in... She looked around the library, at Nathaniel working calmly at his desk. I'm in the Upper East Side. Long story. I'll explain later. They talked for 5 minutes. Harper offered her couch, her spare room, her last $20. Elena declined it all, promising to visit soon. When she hung up, Nathaniel was watching her. You have good friends, he said. One good friend. Everyone else was Derek's. Elena stood, folding the throw with precise movements. So, what now? You said we start today. Nathaniel gestured to the chair across from his desk. First, we need to confirm what I already know. Tell me about Horizon Freight. Elena sat, and for the next hour, she told him everything. How she'd designed the hub and spoke model that made Horizon profitable. How she'd created the multi-tier distribution algorithm that optimized delivery routes. How Derek had pitched it to investors while she waited tables. How her name appeared nowhere on any founding documents. Nathaniel listened, typing notes, occasionally asking questions that demonstrated he understood logistics better than most CEOs. Finally, he turned one of his monitors toward her. On the screen was the article he'd mentioned. 7 years old, yellowed by digital time. And there she was in the background, holding schematics. Derek in front, champagne raised, smile wide for the camera. "You built this," Nathaniel said quietly. "He just sold it. And now he's selling it again. To Aldrich." Elena's hands curled into fists. Nathaniel pulled up another document. "This is the proposed merger. Horizon Freight Solutions to be acquired by Apex Corporation for $2.3 billion. Stock and cash. Announced at the Global Tech Summit on February 5th. Except," he highlighted a section, "read this clause." Elena leaned forward. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. Derek would remain CEO for 6 months, then be transitioned to an advisory role with no operational authority. "He doesn't see it," she whispered. "He thinks he's getting a promotion. He thinks he's joining the big leagues." Nathaniel closed the document. "In 6 months, he'll be escorted out by security with a severance package and a gag order. Aldrich will own everything Derek built. Everything you built." Elena felt sick. "How do we stop it?" Nathaniel opened a new file, a business plan with Meridian Ventures at the top. "We don't stop it, we make it worthless. We build a better network faster. We expose Derek's accounting fraud. We tank Horizon's stock price so low that Apex won't want to touch it. Derek's committing fraud? Not actively, but he's been deferring maintenance costs to inflate quarterly profits. I'd bet my house that he's routing shipments through shell companies to hide losses." Nathaniel pulled up financial statements. "These are Horizon's public filings. These," he pulled up another screen, "these are estimates based on typical operating costs for a fleet that size. See the gap?" Elena saw it. A $4 million gap between what Derek reported and what it should cost to run Horizon's operation. "He's cooking the books," she said. "Not well." Nathaniel smiled. "And we're going to prove it. But first we need leverage, physical leverage, real estate." He pulled up a map of the New York metro area. Red dots marked warehouse locations. One flashed in Jersey City. "This hub handles all of Horizon's pharmaceutical transport. It's the only facility certified for controlled substances. The lease expires in 6 weeks." Nathaniel zoomed in. "If we acquire this property before Derek can renew, we control his most valuable route." "How much? The lease or the building?" "Both." Nathaniel leaned back. "The building is owned by Castellano Real Estate. Family business, loyal to Derek. They won't sell to us, but," he pulled up tax records, "they're underwater on property taxes. Behind by $2.3 million. Elena's mind started racing, falling into the pattern she knew. The pattern Derek had trained her in and then denied her credit for. "We pay off the liens. In exchange, we negotiate a 10-year lease with option to buy. They stay in business. We get the warehouse." Nathaniel's smile widened. "You don't just take, you offer value. That's how you build empires that last." For the first time since she'd signed those divorce papers, Elena felt something other than emptiness. She felt hungry. "When do we start?" she asked. Nathaniel stood, extending his hand. "We already have." The next 3 weeks blurred together in a marathon of 18-hour days. Nathaniel converted his basement into a war room, servers humming, monitors glowing, whiteboards covered in strategic plans. Elena moved into one of the guest rooms. She told herself it was temporary, just until she found her own place. But finding her own place required time she didn't have. Nathaniel taught her hostile M&A tactics, short-selling mechanics, debt acquisition strategies. Elena absorbed it all like desert sand drinking rain. This was what she'd wanted 10 years ago. To build something, to create value, to matter in a way that showed up on spreadsheets and shareholder reports. Derek had wanted a wife who made him look stable. Nathaniel wanted a partner who could think. They worked through Thanksgiving. Elena didn't even realize it was Thanksgiving until she came downstairs and found Nathaniel had ordered Chinese food. "No turkey?" she asked. "Turkey requires gratitude. I'm not there yet." He handed her chopsticks. "But I'm grateful you're here." They ate in the library, the fire crackling, going through Horizon's financials for the 100th time. That's when they found it, the shell companies. Derek had created 3 LLCs in Delaware. He'd been routing shipments through them to hide losses from bad contracts. He's not even good at hiding it, Nathaniel muttered. The company names are almost identical. Horizon East Logistics, Horizon Northeast Logistics, Horizon Atlantic Logistics. He was always better at selling than operating. Elena circled the numbers. This is 4.2 million in hidden losses. If we can document this, we can prove fraud. Nathaniel's eyes gleamed in the firelight. But we need more. We need the Jersey City warehouse first. We need leverage before we can threaten. The next day, Elena called Castellano Real Estate. She didn't identify herself as Derek's ex-wife. She identified herself as CEO of Meridian Ventures, a new logistics firm interested in long-term partnerships. The meeting took place in a cramped office in Jersey City that smelled like old coffee and broken dreams. Marco Castellano was 65, third-generation property owner, wearing a suit that had been expensive in 1995. Elena didn't waste time. Your property taxes are 2.3 million in arrears. The city will seize this building in 90 days. I'm prepared to pay that debt today in exchange for a 10-year lease on your Jersey City warehouse with option to buy at current market value. Marco's face went through several colors. You want to pay my taxes? Why? Because I need that warehouse for the next decade. Because I'd rather have a partner than an enemy. Because Derek Vaughn is going to try to renew his lease in 3 weeks, and I want you to tell him it's no longer available. Marco leaned back in his chair, which creaked dangerously. Derek's been a good tenant. Derek's been a cheap tenant. We'll pay 15% above his current rate, indexed to inflation. We'll maintain the property ourselves. We'll give you first right of refusal if we ever sell our operations. Elena slid the contract across the desk. She'd spent 3 days with Vivian Montgomery, Meridian's lawyer, crafting it. Every clause was airtight. Marco read it slowly, his finger tracing each line. Finally, he looked up. You're his ex-wife. Elena didn't flinch. I'm the woman who designed the system he's renting space for. The system he's about to lose. Marco signed. 2 weeks before Christmas, Derek's lawyer sent a cease and desist letter to Meridian Ventures. It accused them of tortious interference, corporate espionage, and a dozen other impressive-sounding charges that had no legal foundation. Nathaniel read it in the library, then handed it to Elena. This means he's rattled. Good. Elena was working on a presentation for potential investors. Nathaniel had opened doors. Quiet doors, the kind that don't advertise themselves. Old money, patient money. Money that wanted to destroy Apex as much as they did. Christmas came. Elena bought Nathaniel a first edition of Sun Tzu's Art of War. He bought her a Mont Blanc pen, the kind executives use to sign billion-dollar deals. They didn't talk about what they were becoming. They didn't acknowledge the way Elena's hand would brush Nathaniel's when they both reached for the same financial report. They didn't mention how she'd started making his tea in the mornings, or how he'd started remembering exactly how she took her coffee. They were building something. That was enough. Then 2 days after Christmas, Elena received a text from an unknown number. Playing with billionaires? Remember what happened last time you aimed too high. Attached was her wedding photo. Derek's face had been scratched out with something sharp. Elena showed Nathaniel. He traced the number, found it was a burner phone purchased in Manhattan 2 days earlier. They pulled security camera footage from the townhouse. The image was grainy but clear enough. Sienna Blake, standing across the street, photographing Elena through the library window. She's watching us, Elena said. Nathaniel's expression hardened. Then let's give her something to watch. The news broke on a gray morning in late December. Horizon Freight Solutions acquires Portland-based carrier for $18 million. Derek's PR machine spun it as strategic consolidation. Nathaniel saw it for what it was, desperation dressed in a suit. Elena studied the acquisition documents Nathaniel had somehow obtained. The Portland company was worth $11 million on its best day. Derek had overpaid by $7 million he didn't have, buying assets he couldn't maintain, all to project strength he'd lost months ago. He bought their West Coast contracts, but look at their fleet. She pulled up maintenance records. These trucks are ancient. The repair costs alone will bleed him dry within 6 months. Nathaniel leaned over her shoulder, close enough that she could smell cedar and coffee. He's building a house of cards. We just need to blow on it. That afternoon, they began approaching Horizon's key clients, not aggressively, quietly. Meridian Ventures reached out through intermediaries, offering 15% rate reductions and guaranteed delivery windows that Derek's stretch-thin operation couldn't match. 3 major accounts representing $40 million in annual revenue signaled willingness to switch. The industry cocktail party happened the first week of January in a midtown hotel ballroom that tried too hard to be elegant. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, waiters in white gloves serving champagne that cost more per bottle than most people's weekly groceries. Elena wore midnight blue, a dress Dominic Laurent had designed specifically for this moment. The stylist had appeared at the townhouse 3 days earlier, sent by Vivian Montgomery with instructions to create armor, not decoration. "You're not dressing to impress," Dominic had said, circling her with a measuring tape. "You're dressing to intimidate." The result was structured perfection. A gown that hugged every curve but offered no apology. A high slit that suggested danger. A neckline that commanded attention without begging for it. Diamond earrings, Nathaniel's loan, though he'd called them an investment, caught light like daggers. Elena walked into that ballroom and felt heads turn. For 10 years, she'd been Derek's wife, the woman who smiled politely while men talked over her. Tonight, she was CEO of Meridian Ventures, the woman who just secured $50 million in funding and owned the warehouse that made Horizon's pharmaceutical contracts possible. Derek stood near the bar with Sienna clinging to his arm like expensive jewelry. His smile faltered when he saw Elena. He recovered quickly, crossing the room with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. "Elena, you look different." He sipped his scotch. "New job?" "New company." She kept her voice cool. "Meridian Ventures. We're in acquisitions." Derek's laugh was patronizing, practiced. Cute, like a hobby. Like a $50 million Series A, but yes, adorable. The smile cracked at the edges. Sienna tugged at his sleeve, sensing danger the way small animals sense earthquakes. That's when Victor Aldrich materialized from the crowd. 60 years old, bald, impeccably dressed. His eyes blinked too slowly, like a reptile calculating the distance to prey. "Miss Marshall." He extended a hand. "I've heard interesting things. Nathaniel Cross is advising you?" Elena shook his hand once, firmly, then released it. "Mr. Cross is my business partner." Aldrich's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Partnerships with Nathaniel tend to end badly. You should ask his investors from 3 years ago." The words landed like stones in still water, creating ripples Elena couldn't quite see but definitely felt. She maintained her expression, neutral, professional, giving nothing away. "I'll keep that in mind." Aldrich moved on, leaving Derek confused and Elena unsettled. She found Nathaniel on the balcony 10 minutes later, avoiding the crowd, staring at the Manhattan skyline like it owed him money. "Aldrich said your previous investors got burned. What happened?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "That's not relevant." "If I'm your partner, it's relevant." He turned to face her, and in the city lights reflecting off the glass buildings behind him, he looked older, tired. "When Aldrich sued me, I prioritized protecting the algorithm over protecting their capital. I liquidated assets to fund the legal defense. My investors got 30 cents on the dollar. One of them, Richard Morrison, sued me for breach of fiduciary duty. We settled quietly." Elena felt ice forming in her chest. "You bankrupted them?" "I bankrupted myself." His voice carried an edge. I lost everything. They lost money. I lost Sarah, my reputation, my company, my life. But you were still capable of ruthless decisions when backed into a corner. Nathaniel stepped closer, and Elena caught that cedar scent again. I was capable of choosing what mattered most. The algorithm was my life's work. Sarah understood that. My investors understood risk when they wrote their checks. What they didn't understand was that sometimes you burn down your own house to kill the monster inside it. He pulled out his phone, opened an encrypted folder, handed it to her. This is Cross Protocol 2.0, the new algorithm. It's worth $500 million conservatively. I haven't shown anyone, not Aldrich, not the investors circling Meridian, no one. Elena scrolled through pages of code she only partially understood, but she recognized genius when she saw it. This wasn't incremental improvement. This was revolution. I'm trusting you with this because I need you to know I'm not using you. We're building this together. Elena handed back the phone. Her hand brushed his, lingering half a second longer than necessary. Don't make me regret this. I'll try not to. The almost kiss hung in the air between them like suspended animation. Then Nathaniel's phone buzzed. Garrett Brennan with news that couldn't wait. The moment dissolved, but its residue remained, coating everything that came after with the knowledge that something had shifted. 2 weeks later, Horizon's board of directors convened for an emergency meeting. Elena shouldn't have been able to attend. She held no shares, no position, no official connection to the company she'd helped build. But Vivian Montgomery had found the leverage. Meridian's payment for the Jersey City warehouse made them a creditor with material interest. Delaware corporate law allowed creditor representatives at meetings affecting debt obligations. The Horizon headquarters occupied 15 floors of a glass tower in Midtown. Elena rode the elevator with a tablet containing evidence that would destroy Derek's career. Nathaniel waited in the car 3 blocks away, coaching through an earpiece disguised as jewelry. Remember, his voice whispered, you're not there to argue. You're there to present facts and watch them eat him alive. The boardroom was all glass and steel, a fishbowl 50 stories above the city. 12 board members sat around a table that could have comfortably seated 20. Gerald Hutchins, chairman, occupied the head seat. Derek sat to his right, looking confident in a way that wouldn't survive the next hour. Victor Aldrich sat to his left, ostensibly there as Apex's representative for the pending merger, really there to watch Derek bleed. Elena entered carrying her tablet and wearing a power suit that made the midnight blue gown look soft. Navy wool, sharp lines, no compromise. Derek stood. You can't be here. Security. I represent Meridian Ventures, creditor holding the Jersey City warehouse lease. Section 14.3 of your corporate bylaws permits creditor representatives at material meetings. Vivian's voice in her ear. Cite the precedent. Precedent, Morrison versus Tech Corp, Delaware Chancery Court, 2019. Hutchins adjusted his glasses. She's correct. Ms. Marshall may observe. Derek's face cycled through confusion, anger, realization. Elena had learned the law. She'd come prepared. She wasn't the woman who signed napkin business plans anymore. Observe? Elena set her tablet on the table. I'd prefer to present. She didn't wait for permission. She connected to the room's display system and projected the first document. Horizon's maintenance deferral records showing $4.2 million in unpaid repairs spread across 18 months. Mr. Vaughn has systematically deferred critical fleet maintenance to inflate quarterly profits. Industry standard for this size operation suggests maintenance costs of $800,000 per quarter. Horizon reported $200,000. Murmurs rippled through the board. One member, Catherine Wells, audit committee chair, leaned forward with predatory interest. Elena advanced to the next slide. Shell company structure. These 3 Delaware LLCs, Horizon East, Horizon Northeast, Horizon Atlantic, exists solely to hide losses from unprofitable contracts. Shipments get routed through them, creating the appearance of revenue while masking negative margins. Derek tried to interrupt. "This is fabricated," Elena kept talking, calm and clinical. "And finally this," the screen filled with bank records. $8.7 million transferred from Horizon operating accounts to Mr. Vaughn's personal Delaware trust over 14 months. That's not deferred compensation, that's embezzlement. The room exploded. Half the board started talking at once. Hutchins banged his gavel, an actual wooden gavel, like they were playing at being important. Derek stood, pointing at Elena with a shaking hand. "My ex-wife is fabricating evidence. She's bitter, she's desperate. These are bank records with transaction IDs. Would you like me to read them aloud?" Aldrich rose smoothly, his movements calculated. "If these allegations are accurate, this represents serious concern. Apex Corporation cannot partner with a company under SEC investigation." He turned to the board. "I recommend postponing the merger announcement pending forensic audit." The pivot was beautiful in its brutality. Aldrich had planned to acquire Horizon regardless, but now he could do it for pennies on the dollar after Derek's fraud tanked the stock price. He was throwing Derek under the bus while appearing to protect Apex's interests. Elena watched Derek realize he'd been played from every direction. By Aldrich, by her, by his own arrogance. The vote took 7 minutes. Suspend Derek as CEO, effective immediately. Appoint Caroline Foster, the COO, as interim chief executive. Launch internal investigation. Postpone merger discussions. Derek was escorted out by security while Sienna Blake slipped out the back exit, already calculating her next move. Elena walked out of the building into January cold that felt like vindication. Nathaniel waited in the town car, reading something on his phone. When she opened the door, he looked up. "You did it. You destroyed him." Elena slid into the leather seat, and something inside her chest cracked. Not triumph, emptiness. "I feel hollow." Nathaniel took her hand, the first deliberately intimate touch since the balcony. That's how winning feels sometimes, hollow, until you build something better in the space you cleared. That night, Nathaniel took her to 11 Madison Park. The restaurant cost more for one meal than Elena used to make in a month at the diner. They sat in a corner booth with champagne that tasted like expensive regret. "To the woman who just made my $50 million investment look brilliant." Elena touched her glass to his. "To the man who saw me when I was invisible." They talked about everything except business. Nathaniel told her about Sarah, how they'd met in a hospital where he was donating money and she was working a 36-hour shift, how she'd told him his foundation was inefficient and restructured it over coffee, how she died coming home from saving someone else's life while he was in depositions fighting over code. Elena told him about her mother's piano, how learning Chopin had been the only time her mother smiled during chemo, how Derek had known that and donated it anyway because Sienna thought Steinways were old people furniture. By the time they left the restaurant, snow was falling. Central Park stretched before them, white and quiet, the city held at bay by trees and distance. What happens now? Derek's gone. The merger's dead. Is Meridian over? Nathaniel stopped walking. Snow caught in his dark hair like premature aging. Meridian is just beginning. We have infrastructure, capital, clients ready to jump ship. We can build the network I always wanted. But I need to know. What? If you want a business partner or something more. The words hung in the cold air between them. Elena could see her breath, his breath, the space where their breath mingled. "I don't know. This complicates things." Nathaniel smiled, that rare, genuine smile. Things were already complicated. He kissed her. Not tentatively, not asking permission, but not taking either. It was a question posed as a statement, and Elena answered by pulling him closer, her fingers tangling in his hair. snow melting on their faces where warmth met cold. They went back to the townhouse. Elena woke in Nathaniel's bed, tangled in sheets that cost more than her first car. Morning light filtered through curtains she hadn't noticed in the dark. She found Nathaniel in his home office, staring at a computer screen with an expression that turned her champagne-warm contentment into ice water. The email was open. Victor Aldrich to Nathaniel Cross. Subject line, terms. Nathaniel, now that Vaughn has been eliminated, let's discuss terms. The algorithm for Horizon's client list. As agreed. As agreed. Those two words detonated in Elena's chest like shaped charges. As agreed? Her voice came out flat, dead. Nathaniel spun in his chair, panic flashing across his face. Elena, that's not... You've been working with Aldrich this whole time? He stood, hands raised like she was a wild animal he needed to calm. Aldrich contacted me 6 weeks ago. Before I met you, he knew I wanted the algorithm back. He offered a deal. What deal? Nathaniel's shoulders sagged. Help him destroy Derek's credibility and he'd return the patent. Make Derek toxic enough that Aldrich could acquire Horizon cheaply without resistance. I said yes. Initially. Elena backed toward the door, her body making decisions her mind couldn't process. So I was, what? Your weapon? Your convenient tool? You were. Past tense. Then I fell in love with you. The confession should have softened her. It didn't. How do I know you're not lying right now? How do I know this whole thing, us, wasn't part of your plan? Nathaniel moved to his desk, clicked rapidly through email folders. Because I haven't responded to Aldrich in 4 weeks. Look, every message since late December is unanswered. I stopped engaging before we kissed, before last night, before any of this. Elena forced herself to look at the screen. It was true. The last response from Nathaniel was dated December 28th. Need time to consider. Will respond after New Year. After that, 7 emails from Aldrich, all unanswered. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and doubt grows fast in fertile soil. You still plan to betray me. I plan to use the situation to get back what Aldrich stole. Then you walk through my door in the rain, and everything changed. Nathaniel's voice cracked on the edges. Elena, I'm not Derek. I'm not using you. Elena grabbed her coat from where it had landed the night before. I need to think. Where are you going? Anywhere but here. Nathaniel didn't stop her. He just stood in his office, watching her leave, and said, I'll give you space. But Elena, I love you. That's not strategy. That's truth. The taxi smelled like stale cigarettes and broken promises. Elena gave the driver an address she'd looked up 2 days ago, half expecting never to use it. The Modern, MoMA's restaurant. The text had come while she was in the board meeting. If you want to know what Cross is really planning, meet me at the Modern, 8 p.m. Come alone. VA. She deleted it. Now she was going. Victor Aldrich waited at a corner table with a view of the sculpture garden. Snow-covered abstract forms, making them look like sleeping giants. Thank you for coming. I know trust is scarce for you right now. Elena sat without removing her coat. You have 5 minutes. Aldrich slid a tablet across the table. Nathaniel contacted me first, 3 months before your divorce. He pulled up emails, different ones, older ones, with metadata timestamps that looked legitimate. Nate to Aldrich, August 15th. I want my algorithm back. What will it cost? Aldrich to Nate, August 17th. Destroy Derek Vaughn's company. Give me Horizon's infrastructure. Nate to Aldrich, August 20th. Agreed. I'll need time to find the right leverage. The implication hit her like a train. Nathaniel had been hunting for leverage when he, coincidentally, opened his door for her in the rain. The night she thought was chance was actually calculated predation. That night wasn't luck, Elena. Nathaniel tracked your divorce filing. He knew you'd be vulnerable. He paid your taxi driver to bring you to his address. Elena's hands went cold. You're lying. Am I? Check your credit card. Was there a taxi charge that night? She checked. No charge. She'd paid cash, hadn't she? Memory swam, distorted by trauma and rain. Aldrich leaned forward. Here's reality. Meridian Ventures is built on manipulation. When shareholders discover Cross used you as a pawn, SEC will investigate. You'll lose everything. He slid a contract across the table. Or sell me your 55% stake. I'll pay $80 million. You walk away clean, rich, free. Elena stared at the number. 80 million. More money than she'd ever imagined having. Freedom from Derek, from Nathaniel, from all the men who'd shaped her life into forms that served them. Why do you want Meridian? Because it has Horizon's client list, Cross's new algorithm, and the infrastructure to control 60% of U.S. logistics. With it, I finally have the monopoly I deserve. Elena picked up the pen, held it over the signature line. Aldrich's eyes gleamed. Then she signed. Large, clear, unmistakable. Aldrich reached for the contract. Elena pulled it back. That's my handwriting sample for the lawsuit I'm filing tomorrow. Aldrich's face darkened. What? You showed your cards, Victor. You're desperate. You wouldn't offer 80 million unless Meridian is worth 200 million. She stood, letting the contract fall. And your email? Proof? The metadata shows it was created last week. Photoshop job. Sloppy. She leaned down, her voice dropping to a whisper. I may not trust Nate right now, but I trust you even less. Aldrich rose, his mask cracking. You just made a mistake, Ms. Marshall. I crush people like you. Elena pulled on her gloves. People like me built the systems you steal. Try crushing that. She walked out into winter darkness, hand trembling but head high. Behind her, through the restaurant window, she could see Aldrich on his phone, already moving his next pieces. The townhouse felt different when she returned. Colder, or maybe she was colder. Nathaniel waited in the library, pacing a track into the Persian rug. Did you pay my taxi driver? He stopped. What? No. Elena, what did Aldrich? He showed me emails, said you'd planned this for months. Nathaniel moved to his computer, pulled up forensic analysis software, loaded the files Elena described from memory. He's lying. I can prove it. The metadata told stories the eye couldn't see. Creation dates, modification history, IP addresses. Aldrich's evidence had been manufactured 6 days ago, assembled from fragments in forgeries. The original contact had indeed been Aldrich reaching out to Nathaniel after Elena had knocked on his door. Desperation masquerading as opportunity. I admit I was tempted. For 48 hours I considered his offer. Then I met you, and I remembered what I actually wanted. Nathaniel's voice was raw. Not revenge. A life. A partner. You. Elena felt the ice in her chest begin to crack. I want to believe you. Then believe this. Nathaniel pulled up a legal document, typed rapidly. Meridian is yours. I'm signing over my 45%. Full ownership. If you don't trust me as a partner, be the sole CEO. I'll walk away. The offer shocked her more than anything else. Nathaniel was willing to sacrifice everything he'd rebuilt to prove he wasn't using her. I don't want you to walk away. Then what do you want? Equal partnership, real 50-50, not financial, emotional. No more secrets, no more games. Nathaniel crossed the room, took her hands in his. Deal. They kissed again, deeper this time, trust rebuilding itself one breath at a time. The phone rang. Unknown number. Nathaniel put it on speaker. A distorted voice filled the library. Nathaniel Cross, you have 48 hours to transfer Meridian ownership to Apex Corporation, or I release evidence of securities fraud. Your choice. The line went dead. Elena felt her stomach drop. Securities fraud? Nathaniel's face had gone pale. When I shorted Horizon stock, I used insider information from you. That's illegal. If SEC investigates, We both go to prison. They stared at each other across the impossible distance of 2 feet. Everything they'd built was about to collapse unless they found leverage fast. We need something on Aldrich, Elena said. Something bigger than what he has on us. They worked through the night, 72 hours of research condensed into fury and coffee. Garrett Brennan joined them, bringing Goldman Sachs' expertise and contacts who traded information like currency. The breakthrough came at 4 in the morning. Apex's acquisition of Cross Protocol hadn't just been theft, it was fraud. The patent filing claimed independent development, but the timeline was fabricated. The patent examiner who'd approved it, Grant Holloway, had received $50,000 from an Apex subsidiary 2 months after signing off. Holloway was retired now, living in Tampa, beyond reach, beyond caring. But the paper trail existed, buried in servers Nathaniel shouldn't have accessed, but did anyway, using skills that occupied legal gray zones. An email from Aldrich to his legal team: bury the Holloway payment. If Cross ever finds out, we're exposed. Bribery, patent fraud, 10-year felony. We can't use hacked evidence in court, Vivian Montgomery warned over video call. Fruit of the poison tree. Elena smiled. We don't need court. We need public opinion. Michelle Reeves answered her phone on the third ring. The investigative journalist had been sniffing around Horizon for weeks, sensing blood in the water. I have a story for you. About Apex Corporation, patent fraud, and $50,000 that bought a monopoly. They fed Michelle everything except how they'd obtained it. Journalists have ways of confirming information through legitimate channels. Michelle had sources at the patent office, contacts at SEC, friends who owed favors. The article would drop at the Global Tech Summit in 4 days. Maximum press coverage, maximum damage. That left the insider trading problem. If Aldrich filed his complaint before the article published, Elena and Nathaniel would be arrested before they could deploy their weapon. He won't file, Nathaniel said with more confidence than he felt. Filing exposes him too. We're playing mutually assured destruction. Whoever blinks first loses everything. Elena packed for the summit. The dress Dominique Laurent had created made the midnight blue look amateur. Liquid gold that caught light like molten metal, structured to suggest both power and danger. Nathaniel found her in front of the mirror, adjusting diamond earrings. What if I'm not enough? What if you regret choosing me over $80 million? Elena turned to face him. I didn't choose you over money. I chose myself. You're just the bonus. Nathaniel laughed, the first real laugh she'd heard from him in days. Bonus? I'm the $500 million algorithm. You're the man who makes Earl Grey at 2 in the morning when I can't sleep. That's worth more. The night before the summit, Derek Vaughn was arrested. FBI agents raided his Manhattan apartment at dawn, executing warrants for embezzlement, wire fraud, securities violations. The charges stem from evidence the FBI had been building for 6 weeks, since Elena had quietly provided them with documentation through an intermediary. Elena watched the news coverage with something like pity. Derek in handcuffs looked smaller than she remembered, diminished, just a man who'd made bad choices and worse enemies. FBI had been investigating since you gave them the files, Nathaniel said. They just waited for the right moment. And now he can't interfere with the summit. Nathaniel pulled her close. Are you ready for this? Once we go public, there's no going back. Elena thought about the piano Derek had donated, about 10 years of invisible labor, about the woman who'd signed those divorce papers thinking her life was over. I'm ready. The Jacob Javits Center glowed like a crystal palace against the February night. 2,000 people in designer clothes drinking expensive wine, pretending their companies weren't one bad quarter from irrelevance. Elena arrived alone, Nathaniel waiting backstage per their plan. The gold dress caught every light, every camera, every eye. She wasn't Derek's wife anymore. She wasn't even just CEO of Meridian Ventures. She was the woman who destroyed Derek Vaughn in a boardroom and was about to destroy Victor Aldrich on a stage. Sienna Blake lurked near the bar, trying to position herself as Horizon's savior now that Derek was in federal custody. Her desperation was palpable, clinging to relevance like a drowning person clutching debris. Aldrich held court center stage, surrounded by sycophants and yes-men. When he saw Elena, his smile was shark-like. "Miss Marshall, brave of you to show your face. Mr. Aldrich, foolish of you to assume I'd hide." His keynote began at 7. The ballroom darkened. Spotlights found him at the podium, silver-haired and confident. Today, Apex Corporation announces its partnership with Horizon Freight Solutions. Despite recent management changes, we're moving forward with integration. Together, we'll create the largest logistics infrastructure in North America. The stock market erupted. Apex shares jumped 18% in after-hours trading. Elena watched from the VIP section, fingers gripping the armrest. Nathaniel's voice came through her earpiece. "Stick to the plan. Let him celebrate." Aldrich continued. "And now, I'd like to invite our newest board member." The projection screen behind him flickered. A technical glitch, or what looked like one. Michelle Reeves's article filled the massive display. Apex Corp CEO implicated in patent fraud, bribery scandal exposed. The audience gasped. Aldrich spun, staring at the screen displaying his crimes in 40-point font. "This is a technical error." But the article kept scrolling. $50,000 to Grant Holloway. Fabricated development timeline. Internal emails showing the cover-up. Press photographers swarmed, phones out, capturing everything. Michelle Reeves stood from the audience, her voice cutting through chaos. "Mr. Aldrich, I'm Michelle Reeves from Reuters. Can you comment on allegations that Apex obtained the cross-protocol patent through bribery of a federal official?" Aldrich stammered, his composure cracking like ice under pressure. This is defamation." Elena rose from her seat. She walked down the aisle toward the stage, gold dress shimmering, every eye tracking her movement. Aldrich saw her coming. "Security, this woman is not authorized." Elena took the microphone from the podium. "I'm Elena Marshall, CEO of Meridian Ventures, and I have authorization from the original patent holder." Nathaniel stepped out from backstage. The crowd lost its collective mind. Phone cameras flashed like lightning. The ghost of Wall Street had returned, and he'd brought proof. Nathaniel took the stage like he was reclaiming territory that had always belonged to him. The projection screen behind him shifted from Michelle's article to forensic analysis. Charts, timelines, bank transfers rendered in clinical precision. Victor Aldrich didn't just steal my algorithm, he corrupted the patent system itself. Nathaniel's voice carried across the silent ballroom. "Patent number US 102345667B, approved by Grant Holloway on March 15, 2023. Mr. Holloway received $50,000 from an Apex subsidiary on April 30, 2023. The screen displayed the bank transfer, transaction ID visible in stark digits. "This isn't business, this is fraud." Aldrich tried to regain control, stepping toward the microphone. "Cross is a disgraced executive who lost his company through incompetence. This is revenge fantasy dressed as journalism." Elena cut him off. "Then explain why Horizon Freight's books show $8.7 million funneled from Derek Vaughn's accounts to yours over the past 18 months. She projected new evidence, bank records showing payments from Derek's Delaware Trust to an Apex shell company. The transactions formed a pattern too consistent to be coincidence. Derek wasn't just cooking his books. He was paying you bribes for favorable merger terms. You were getting paid twice. Once to acquire Horizon cheap, once to take Derek's embezzled money and make it disappear." The room erupted. Phones appeared everywhere, recording, photographing, live streaming Aldrich's destruction to millions of people who'd never heard of patent law but understood corruption when they saw it. FBI agents entered through the side doors. They'd been waiting, coordinated by Michelle's article, and evidence packages delivered anonymously to federal prosecutors 3 days earlier. The lead agent was a woman in her 40s, with the kind of face that had seen everything and believed nothing. Victor Aldrich, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, bribery of federal officials, and violation of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Aldrich's hands were pulled behind his back. Metal handcuffs clicked shut with finality. As security escorted him toward the exit, he locked eyes with Elena one last time. You'll regret this. Elena felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction. Just the hollow recognition that revenge tastes like ashes in the mouth. I regret wasting time hating you. You're just irrelevant now. The ballroom descended into controlled chaos. Apex stock was plummeting in real time, down 34% and still falling. Horizon freight trading was halted pending SEC review. Journalists mobbed Elena and Nathaniel, questions coming so fast they blurred into white noise. They slipped out through a service exit into the February cold. The town car waited 3 blocks away, engine running, Garrett Brennan at the wheel. Get in before someone realizes you left. The car pulled into traffic. For a full minute, nobody spoke. Then Nathaniel started laughing, not the polite chuckle of social obligation, but real laughter, the kind that comes from releasing pressure you didn't know you were carrying. Elena joined him, tension draining away, replaced by something that felt dangerously close to joy. We did it. Nathaniel took her hand. We did it. The moment broke when Vivian Montgomery called. Her voice through the speaker was professionally calm, but carried an undercurrent of urgency. SEC wants to interview you both. Tomorrow morning. They're looking at the Horizon short positions. The insider trading. The blade that had been hanging over them since Aldrich's threat. Tell them we'll cooperate fully. Elena's voice was steady. We have nothing to hide. Vivian's pause was eloquent. You committed securities fraud. That's something to hide. Aldrich committed patent fraud and bribery. Let's see who the SEC prioritizes. The interview took place in a conference room that smelled like old coffee and new carpet. 2 SEC attorneys, both younger than Elena, both carrying the zealous energy of people who believed enforcement mattered, laid out the timeline. Meridian Ventures shorted 50,000 shares of Horizon Freight on December 12th. 2 weeks later, Ms. Marshall presented evidence of fraud to Horizon's board, causing the stock to drop 14%. You profited $2.3 million from information Ms. Marshall possessed as a former insider. The female attorney, Sarah Cortez, watched Elena with hawk eyes. That's textbook insider trading. Nathaniel leaned forward. What's also textbook is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act violation you're investigating regarding Victor Aldrich. Patent fraud, bribery of federal officials, embezzlement, conspiracy. Are you really going to prosecute us for making $2 million while Aldrich stole $500 million? The male attorney, David Kim, tapped his pen against the table. We can prosecute everyone. Federal resources aren't zero-sum. No, but headlines are. Elena kept her voice level. And juries. You can spend 2 years proving we made a relatively small profit on a technical violation, or you can spend that time putting Victor Aldrich in prison for crimes that actually hurt people. Your choice, but one makes you look like heroes, and the other makes you look like bureaucrats. Vivian kicked her under the table. You weren't supposed to antagonize federal prosecutors. But Elena was done playing by rules that only applied to people without power. The negotiations took 6 hours. Meridian Ventures would pay a $2 million fine, returning all profits from the short position plus penalties. Elena and Nathaniel would receive immunity from prosecution in exchange for testimony against Aldrich and Derrick. They'd divest any Horizon assets within 12 months. It was expensive. It was humiliating. It was survival. Walking out of the SEC building into gray February afternoon, Elena felt lighter. The sword had been sheathed, the threat neutralized. $2 million. Nathaniel hailed a cab. Could have been worse. Could have been prison. They went back to the townhouse. The library felt different now. Less like a war room, more like a place where strategies transformed into realities. Nathaniel poured scotch into crystal tumblers that probably cost more than the fine they just paid. What now? Aldrich is in custody. Derek's facing federal charges. Meridian is valued at $200 million and climbing. We won. Elena sipped the scotch. It burned going down, a reminder that even victories have costs. Winning feels emptier than I expected. That's because you're not done yet. Nathaniel sat beside her on the leather sofa, close enough that their shoulders touched. Aldrich and Derek were obstacles. Now we create what we actually wanted all along. Over the next 6 months, Meridian Ventures transformed from revenge vehicle into legitimate enterprise. They acquired 3 regional carriers in deals structured for fairness rather than conquest. They released Cross Protocol 2.0 as open-source technology, letting competitors access the algorithm that had started the whole war. You're giving away $500 million, Garrett warned during the board meeting where they voted on open sourcing. Nathaniel shook his head. I'm giving away what keeping secret cost me. Patents create enemies. Shared technology creates ecosystems. Elena voted yes. The board followed. Within 3 months, Meridian became the platform small businesses use to access enterprise-level logistics. They weren't just moving packages, they were redistributing power. In May, Horizon Freight assets went to bankruptcy auction. Meridian purchased them for $45 million, a fraction of the company's peak value, but fair given the debt and damage. Elena insisted on 2 conditions: rehire 80% of laid-off workers and establish a $10 million pension protection fund. You're putting heart before profit, Garrett observed. I'm putting people before spreadsheets. There's a difference. She promoted Janelle Rodriguez, the warehouse supervisor who'd secretly provided evidence against Derek, to vice president of operations. Janelle had 3 kids, a mortgage, and an instinct for logistics that reminded Elena of herself 10 years ago. Why me? Because you chose integrity when it was dangerous, and because I need people who remember what it's like to be overlooked. By August, Meridian Ventures was valued at $1.2 billion. Elena's 55% stake was worth $660 million. She was on track to become a billionaire before her 34th birthday. Forbes called for an interview. Elena agreed on one condition. They had to mention the workers she'd rehired and the pension fund she'd established. Profits meant nothing if they came from stepping on people who'd laid the foundation. The feature ran with a cover photo. Elena in the same gold dress from the summit, standing in an empty warehouse that used to belong to Derek, light streaming through high windows like a baptism. The headline, "The CEO who turned betrayal into billions." Nathaniel stayed in the background, preferring his role as CTO. He gave interviews to technical journals, spoke at conferences about open source innovation, rebuilt his reputation one algorithm at a time. They moved into a new penthouse together, modern, bright, filled with light and space that felt nothing like Derek's cold monument to status. The first thing Elena asked Nathaniel to do was find her mother's piano. It took 3 weeks of tracking donations, calling Goodwill stores across 5 boroughs, following a trail that led to a church in Queens where the piano was being used for children's music lessons. Nathaniel bought it back for 10 times what the church had paid, had it restored by craftsmen who specialized in Steinways from that era, delivered it to their penthouse on a Saturday morning when Elena was out meeting with the Marshall Foundation board. She came home to find it waiting in the living room, light from floor-to-ceiling windows making the black lacquer shine like obsidian. A single note sat on the keys, Nathaniel's handwriting. Some things shouldn't stay lost. Elena ran her fingers across the ivory, pressed middle C, let the note hang in the air. Then she sat down and played Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the piece her mother had requested during her last lucid week. Nathaniel appeared in the doorway halfway through, listening without interrupting. When the final notes faded, he crossed the room and sat beside her on the bench. "You remembered," she said. "I remember everything about you." That night, he gave her a different kind of gift, a legal document transferring 5% of his Meridian shares to her, bringing them to perfect equity, 50-50. "You had 55%, I thought. I'm buying back 5% so we're equal. Partners in everything, remember?" The contract sat on the piano beside a small box. Elena opened it, expecting jewelry. Instead, she found a key. "To the warehouse in Jersey City where we're constructing the new R&D facility. Your name's on the deed, too." Elena laughed, tears threatening mascara she'd finally learned to apply correctly. "This is the most romantic thing anyone's ever given me. Better than diamonds? Better than anything that doesn't create futures." November arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made Manhattan look like a postcard of itself. 1 year since the divorce that was supposed to end her. 1 year since she'd knocked on the wrong door in the rain. The annual business gala was the same event where Elena had first appeared in Midnight Blue, where Derek had patronized her and Aldrich had planted seeds of doubt. This year, she arrived in a dress Dominique Laurent had spent 2 months perfecting. Deep emerald that shifted to black in shadow, structured like armor but flowing like water. Nathaniel walked beside her, no longer hiding, his hand at the small of her back in a gesture that was protective without being possessive. Press swarmed. Questions came rapid fire. "Ms. Marshall, Meridian just acquired Apex Corporation's logistics division. How does it feel?" Elena smiled for the cameras. "Apex's assets will be used to expand access, not restrict it. We're converting their warehouses into small business incubation centers and opening their technology to companies that have been shut out of enterprise logistics." Inside the ballroom, the same people who dismissed her last year now competed for her attention. Elena was gracious, professional, and completely uninterested in their validation. She saw Derek near the velvet rope outside. Security wouldn't let him in without a ticket. He looked diminished. Cheap suit that hung wrong on a frame that had lost weight. Thinner hair. Eyes that had learned what losing everything actually meant. He caught her looking and tried to approach. A security guard stepped between them. "Elena, please, 5 minutes. I have a business proposal." Elena could have kept walking, should have kept walking, but there was something to be said for closure. She nodded to security, who stepped back but stayed close. "What kind of proposal?" Hope flickered in Derek's face like a candle in wind. "I have connections in the Midwest. Distribution networks I could help you leverage. I know I made mistakes, but I still understand the industry." "Derek!" Elena's voice was kind, which somehow made it worse. "I'm going to be honest with you. A year ago, you taught me something valuable." "What's that?" "That I never needed you. I needed myself." She turned to walk away. Derek's desperation cracked through what was left of his pride. "I made you. You were nothing without—" Elena didn't even turn back. "You held me back. Watch me fly." Security escorted him away. Sienna Blake, watching from the bar, made no move to help him. She'd already moved on to a venture capital partner she'd been courting since Derek's arrest. Some people never learned that loyalty matters more than opportunity. Elena rejoined Nathaniel near the champagne fountain. He handed her a glass. "How do you feel?" "Complete." They slipped away from the crowd to a balcony overlooking Manhattan. The city spread below them, lights creating constellations of human ambition and failure and everything in between. Steam rose from subway grates. Taxis honked their eternal song. Somewhere down there, people were signing contracts that would change their lives. Somewhere, a door was opening. "A year ago, I stood in the rain with 2 suitcases, feeling like my life had ended." Nathaniel pulled her closer against the November cold. "And now? Now I own the building where I stood in that rain." He laughed, the sound warm in the frozen air. You actually bought 1847 Willoughby? Elena's smile was genuine, unguarded. Closed escrow last week. I'm converting it to transitional housing for women leaving abusive relationships. Safe harbor when everything falls apart. You're going to change the world. We are, together. Nathaniel looked at her in the way that still made her breath catch, like she was the most valuable thing in any room, any city, any universe. He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. Elena's heart jumped, then settled when she saw it wasn't ring-sized. She wasn't ready for that. Maybe she'd never be ready for that. And maybe that was okay. Inside was a USB drive. Cross Protocol 3.0. You're the first person to see it. Equal partner, remember? Elena held the drive, this tiny piece of plastic containing millions of dollars of intellectual property, offered without hesitation or reservation. Trust rendered in silicon and code. You're such a nerd. You love it. I love you. They kissed on the balcony while Manhattan glittered below, indifferent to small human dramas of revenge and redemption. The city that had witnessed Elena's destruction now witnessed her resurrection, and it didn't care either way. Cities never do. They just provide the stage. You have to write your own script. When they pulled apart, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. I have one more thing. If it's another business plan, I'm throwing you off this balcony. He laughed and pulled out his phone, opened an email, handed it to her. Subject line, R.E. Marshall Foundation, University Partnership Proposal. The president of Elena's alma mater had accepted her offer to fund full scholarships for 50 women in STEM programs annually. Not loans, not partial assistance. Full rides including housing, books, and a living stipend so they wouldn't have to choose between education and eating. You did this without telling me? I did this because of you. The foundation has your name. It should have your values. Elena scrolled through the email, vision blurring. 50 women every year. In 10 years, 500 women who wouldn't have to sacrifice the way she had, who wouldn't have to wait tables while men stole their ideas, who would walk into boardrooms with credentials nobody could dismiss. This is, her voice broke, this is better than revenge. This is what comes after revenge. When you stop destroying and start creating. They stayed on that balcony until the cold drove them inside, until the gala wound down and the crowds thinned. They said their goodbyes to people whose names Elena would forget by morning, whose opinions mattered less than the quiet certainty she felt when Nathaniel's hand found hers in the back of the town car. The penthouse was dark when they arrived home. Elena kicked off her heels, padded barefoot across hardwood to the piano. She didn't turn on the lights. The city provided enough illumination through floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan as nightlight, as witness, as indifferent companion. She sat at the piano and played, not Chopin this time, something simpler, Clair de Lune, Debussy's Meditation on Moonlight and Memory. Her fingers found the notes through muscle memory and emotion, through the knowledge that some things transcend loss. Nathaniel sat beside her on the bench, not touching, just present. When she finished, the silence that followed felt full rather than empty. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How strange it is that the worst day of my life led to the best year. If Derek hadn't been cruel, you never would have knocked on my door. If Aldrich hadn't stolen from you, you never would have been home to answer." Elena turned to face him. "Maybe we should thank them." "Let's not go that far." They laughed, and the sound filled the penthouse with something warmer than heat, more sustaining than food. They sat at that piano while the city slept, and woke, and went about its business, while somewhere Derek Vaughan lay in a federal prison cell, counting days, while Victor Aldrich did the same 3 states away. Neither man knew that their cruelty had created something more valuable than they destroyed. Neither man would ever understand that the woman they dismissed as irrelevant had become inevitable. Elena had learned the truth that takes most people a lifetime to discover. Rock bottom isn't the end. It's just the place where you finally stop digging and start building. And what you build from that solid foundation can reach heights the people who pushed you down will never see. She didn't just survive. She didn't just win. She became free. And freedom, she discovered, was the only revenge worth having. Because the people who hurt you aren't even in the room when you finally claim it. They're just memories you occasionally dust off to remind yourself how far you've traveled. Derek would serve 6 years in federal prison. He'd be released at 41, diminished but not destroyed, ordinary but not broken. He'd find work. He'd rebuild a smaller life. He'd never understand what he'd lost when he donated that piano. Victor Aldrich would serve 12 years. He'd fight it with appeals that went nowhere, with lawyers who billed by the hour and delivered nothing. He'd die angry, which was perhaps the cruelest sentence of all. Sienna Blake would marry and divorce twice more before learning that loyalty can't be purchased, only earned. She'd end up managing a boutique consulting firm in Boston, successful enough to be comfortable, invisible enough to be forgotten. But Elena Marshall would do none of those things. She'd grow Meridian Ventures into a publicly traded company worth billions. She'd establish foundations that would outlive her. She'd mentor hundreds of women who knocked on doors, both literal and metaphorical, and found themselves facing either opportunity or rejection, teaching them that the only opinion that mattered was their own. She'd stand at podiums and tell her story without shame, owning both the mistakes and the triumphs, the naivety and the wisdom earned through pain. She'd never marry Nathaniel Cross, though they'd spend 20 years together before age and circumstance separated them gently rather than cruelly. They'd remain partners in business and friendship long after romance faded, proving that some connections transcend categories. But all of that was future. Tonight was present. Tonight was Elena Marshall, at 33, sitting at her mother's piano in a penthouse she'd earned, with a man who saw her worth before the world did, in a city that didn't care but provided the battlefield anyway. She played one more piece before bed, not Chopin or Debussy, something her mother had taught her when she was 7 years old, before cancer had stolen her voice, but not her hands. A simple melody that Elena had forgotten and then remembered, lost and then reclaimed. When the last note faded, Nathaniel stood and offered his hand. Ready for tomorrow? Elena took his hand and rose from the bench. Ready for everything. They walked to bed together while the piano sat in moonlight, its keys silent but not empty, its strings vibrating with residual sound that would fade but never fully disappear. Like memory, like pain, like every lesson learned the hard way and earned the right way, and finally, blessedly understood. Outside, Manhattan hummed its eternal rhythm. Inside, Elena Marshall slept without nightmares for the first time in a year. And when she woke, she'd do what survivors do. She'd get up, show up, and keep going. Not because revenge demanded it, not because pride required it, but because she'd finally learned that the best way to defeat the people who hurt you is to become someone they could never imagine you being. Someone free.